Chapter 994. The reason why he spent so much effort to nag in front of Wu Xiong was to get Wu Xiong to agree, but the most important reason was to gain Wu Xiong's support. No matter how stupid he was, he knew that Wu Xiong had been the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace for so many years. It was impossible that he didn't have any power in the netherworld that he could borrow. If that was the case, then Wu Xiong wouldn't have held this position for so many years. It could also be described as incompetent. How could the Immortal Emperor let an incompetent person be the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace? Father-in-law, have a safe trip. I won't see you off. Wu Xiong cupped his fists and bowed slightly. He watched Mu Bing leave with a sneer on his face. With his intelligence, how could he not know that Mu Bing wanted to borrow his power? Since Mu Bing was in such a hurry, he would fulfill his wish. In any case, he only gave some verbal help and didn't show any evidence. As for the Onyx army, if anything happened, he wouldn't be implicated. Moreover, judging from Mu Bing's words and actions just now, it was obvious that he was prepared. Perhaps he could really kill Yu Qianqiu. However, what Wu Xiong didn't know was that in the world of Yu Qianqiu's previous life, there was an idiom called armchair strategists. When one had nothing to do, one could boast and speak eloquently. However, when it came to real action, it was far from the case. If Mu Tianjiao had been present just now, she would have desperately tried to stop her father from doing that because she knew her father too well. How could she not know what her father was capable of? She never thought that her father could be a match for Yu Qianqiu, so she repeatedly advised him not to provoke Yu Qianqiu, but Wu Xiong wasn't a fool. He let Mu Bing do whatever he wanted because he had other intentions. The real reason was that Mu Bing had just said something about Mu Tianjiao and Yu Qianqiu. Regardless of how Yu Qianqiu was, Wu Xiong could see that this father-in-law of his could even insult the reputation of his only daughter, let alone him, his son-in-law. One could imagine what he wouldn't do in the future. At this rate, he would be implicated sooner or later. Then let him kill Yu Qianqiu. It would be best if they could kill Yu Qianqiu. If Mu Tianjiao really had a Yu Qianqiu in her heart, it would cut off Mu Tianjiao's yearning. For someone who loved her, it was a good thing. At the same time, Mu Tianjiao would surely hate her father because of this. Then, he could justifiably distance himself from Mu Bing, so as not to implicate himself in the future, and not to cause a rift between him and Mu Tianjiao. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. If Mu Bing failed to kill Yu Qianqiu and was killed by Yu Qianqiu instead, it would be a good thing for him. Now that Mu Bing was dead, this inconvenient burden was completely gone. Naturally, Mu Tianjiao would also completely cut off her thoughts of Yu Qianqiu. One could imagine how she would treat the person who killed her father. Similarly, it was killing two birds with one stone. In short, no matter who died, it would be a good thing for him, so Wu Xiong was naturally happy to do it. Poor Mu Bing. Little did he know that this little trick of his was not even worth mentioning in the eyes of some people. He was just digging a pit that would harm others and himself. Whether or not he could harm others was another matter, but he was definitely going to harm himself. On the rapidly flying shuttle, Yu Qianqiu sat at the back of the shuttle with his legs crossed. He leaned on the side of the shuttle with one hand supporting his head and looked at the scenery. It had already been 2 days. Qian Yun Xayan, who was silently standing at the front of the flying shuttle, had his back facing him. The two of them had almost never communicated. Only Yu Qianqiu would tease him from time to time. Unfortunately, the other party simply ignored him. Drowsily, Yu Qianqiu felt the red light piercing his eyes. He opened his eyes slightly and saw that it was another rising sun. It was the 4th day since he left the psychedelic immortal city. In front of him, Qian Yun Xian's imposing figure blocked most of the piercing sunlight. Yu Qianqiu could not help but sigh at his foresight. Fortunately, he was not the one driving the flying shuttle. Just as he was letting his imagination run wild, the front end of the flying shuttle suddenly pressed down and slammed diagonally towards the ground. With the back of the shuttle tilted up, Yu Qianqiu grabbed the sides of the flying shuttle. He could see the ground getting closer and closer to him. He immediately cried out in alarm, "What are you trying to do, Qian Yunxian?" Like a nail, Qian Yunxian, who was standing firmly at the front of the flying shuttle, descended against the wind. He looked back and snorted coldly, "Cowardly rat." Then, the flying shuttle abruptly returned to normal and flew almost close to the ground. Finally, it slowly stopped in front of a magnificent palace built against a mountain. Bang! The moment the flying shuttle landed on the ground, Qian Yunxian had already floated out and landed lightly on the steps of the palace's entrance. Yu Qianqiu dashed out as if he was running for his life. Then, he took the flying shuttle in his hand and checked it. After confirming that it was not damaged, he put it away. Just as he was about to scold Qian Yunxian, he saw two golden-robed guards at the entrance of the palace. He immediately looked around and found that it was the entrance to the netherworld that everyone had mentioned. Only then did he know why Qian Yunxian had stopped. "Damn it! Why didn't you say anything?" Yu Qianqiu cursed under his breath. In his heart, he was also amazed at the vastness of the immortal world. With Qian Yunxian's cultivation, it took him more than 3 days to fly from the psychedelic immortal city to here. If it was him, who knew how many days it would take to fly? This was the difference in cultivation. After looking around, he swayed towards a small hill on the side. Just as he reached the top of the hill, he heard Qian Yunxian's voice behind him, "Where are you going now?" "To pee." Yu Qianqiu turned back and roared. Just as he lifted his robe, he found that there was a call in front of him that seemed to be more hidden. He turned back and roared again, "Don't peek." Qian Yunxian's face immediately darkened. He had no intention of peeking at all. After turning into the call, Yu Qianqiu looked around. After confirming that there was no one, he took out a silver ball and pressed it into the mountain wall. This was mainly to shorten the time it would take to reach the entrance to the netherworld. Then, he lifted up his long robe and fired a shot to deceive others. After tying his belt, he swayed back to the entrance of the palace. Qian Yunxian looked at him coldly and sneered, "Why don't you take a dump again?" Yu Qianqiu shrugged disapprovingly, "This thing doesn't care about travel together. The place I just went is very hidden. If you want to take me there, I'll wait for you." Qian Yunxian's lips moved, but he forcefully held back and did not say anything. He realized that he was not a match for Yu Qianqiu in a quarrel. The main thing was that he was not as shameless as Yu Qianqiu. The two golden-robed guards looked at each other. They had never heard anyone talk about taking a dump here. It was simply unbearable. One of them immediately shouted, "This is the entrance to the netherworld. Those with the token can enter. Those without the token are not allowed to make a ruckus here. Leave quickly." Yu Qianqiu immediately took out his netherworld passage token and waved it in front of the ash cloud messenger in a threatening manner. It was as if he was saying, "Did you hear that? Those without the token are not allowed to make a ruckus here. I can make a ruckus with the token. If you don't have it, you better shut up obediently." Qian Yunxian's face darkened again. Although their heartless palace had the netherworld token, it had always been used by groups. They would rarely give it to a single person, unless there was something important. He immediately said in a deep voice, "If you want to go in alone without me, this old man will be more than happy to do so." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and snorted coldly, as if saying, "In your dreams." Then, he walked up to the guards and handed over the token for them to check. After confirming it, the guards let the two of them in. The two of them walked in one after the other. There was nothing in the hall. The four walls were chiseled with knives and axes, and there was only a long tunnel. The tunnel was abnormally dark, and it was frighteningly quiet. Only the sound of their footsteps could be heard. At the end of the tunnel, there was a ball of black light spinning tirelessly. It was unknown how many years it had been spinning here. You go in first. Yu Qianqiu moved to the side. After all, he had never been to the netherworld, so he was more or less unsure. Qian Yun Xan snorted coldly and disappeared into the spinning black light in a flash. Yu Qianqiu hesitated for a long time, but he finally plucked up his courage and jumped in. The moment he entered the spinning black light, colorful flowing lights appeared in front of him. An unknown gravitational force sucked him in, and when there was a flash of light, he was spat out. The sky was dark, and there was no light from the sun or the moon. It was like the moment when twilight was about to turn into night. This was the first thing that Yu Qianqiu felt when he landed and saw this world. However, before he could see anything else, Yu Qianqiu. Qian Yun Xian's angry roar rang out. Yu Qianqiu looked over and saw over a dozen black-armored, knife-wielding soldiers surrounding Grey Cloud Xian. Grey Cloud Xian was looking at Yu Qianqiu as if he wanted to swallow him alive. Damn it! Could it be that the netherworld was in such chaos? It really lived up to its reputation. Before he could figure out what was going on, a stocky armored general appeared in front of him. He held a large blade that looked like a green dragon crescent moon blade and shouted, "Incomer, show me your token of passage to the netherworld." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the besieged Sangyan Xian and cautiously took out his netherworld passage medallion. While the other side was checking the medallion, Yu Qianqiu pointed at Sangyan Xian and carefully asked, "General, what crime did he commit?" After the armored general verified that there was nothing wrong with the token, he returned it to Yu Qianqiu and asked, "He's with you?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered. He could not figure out the situation, nor did he know what kind of crime Qian Yun Xian had committed. If he was with him, would he be implicated? As soon as he hesitated, Qian Yun Xian panicked and roared, "Yu Qianqiu, what do you think you're doing?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the situation around him. There weren't many people here, so he guessed that these people might not be a match for Qian Yun Xian. He replied weakly, "He's with me." "Is there a problem?" The armored general immediately rolled his eyes and snapped, "No problem, all of you scram." The dozen or so saber-wielding soldiers surrounding Grey Cloud Xian also flashed back. Yu Qianqiu walked up to Grey Cloud Xian, who was glaring at him with fire in his eyes, and asked suspiciously, "What did you do? You made such a big fuss and almost implicated me. Do you really not know?" Qian Yun Xian's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. "I just came in. How would I know what you did?" Yu Qianqiu was confused. He did not know that after he let Qian Yun Xian come in first, he had been too careful and hesitated a little too long at the entrance to the immortal world. As soon as Qian Yun Xian arrived in the netherworld, the guards naturally wanted to see his netherworld token, but he did not have it. He could only say that the token was with the person behind him and would come in soon. But what made him panic was that after waiting for a long time, Yu Qianqiu still didn't come in. He immediately suspected that he had been tricked by Yu Qianqiu. The guards waited for a long time and did not see anyone come in. They naturally suspected that he was a trespasser and immediately surrounded him. Fortunately, the guards realized that Qian Yun Xian's cultivation was very high. It was probably not something they could handle, so they didn't make a move. Otherwise, they would have captured Qian Yun Xian first. It was also at this critical moment that the late Yu Qianqiu finally came. This was what happened. Qian Yun Xian saw that he did not look like he was lying. After a bit of analysis, he felt that he was not lying. If he really wanted to harm him, he would not have come in. Even if he came in, he could have denied not knowing him and caused a conflict between him and the guards. He paused and said, "This should be your first time in the netherworld, right?" Yu Qianqiu's brain was still somewhat good. After hearing his question and looking at the guards at the entrance, he pondered for a bit and understood what was going on. However, he did not regret not taking the opportunity to trick Qian Yun Xian, because it was useless now. With Qian Yun Xian's ability, if he was forced into a corner, he could easily escape back to the immortal world. The exit was right in front of him, and the guards here should not be able to stop him. Yu Qianqiu replied with a non-committal "n," indicating that it was indeed his first time in the netherworld. Then, he began to look around. A huge stone tablet at the side, diagonally facing the exit of the netherworld, attracted his attention. Anyone who entered the netherworld from the immortal world would probably be able to see the inscription on it. The vast netherworld, a world of its own. Birth, old age, sickness, and death. The ultimate place, the netherworld. 20 large, blood-red words were forcefully engraved on the huge black stone tablet. The words exuded an ancient aura, making people have the urge to kneel and worship them. Yu Qianqiu's gaze turned towards the endless darkness. This place was not completely dark. There was a hint of a green haze to it. It felt like there was some light, but he couldn't tell where the light was. It was like the moment when dusk turned to night, or when the night was about to break. Everything was hazy. The guards at the entrance of the netherworld looked at the two fellows who were unwilling to leave. From time to time, they would look at their leader, who was the guy who had just checked Yu Qianqiu's pass. Logically speaking, at this time, the leader should have shouted, "Since you have the pass, you are not allowed to stay. Leave immediately." But the strange thing was that the leader looked to the side with his hands behind his back, as if he had not seen anything. Chapter 995. This was called smart people doing smart things, or being perceptive. At first, the armored general only realized that he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. Later, when Yu Qianqiu came in, he didn't pay much attention at first, because Yu Qianqiu's weak response made him look down on him a little. However, when he realized that he also couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, he was shocked. Why did two immortal emperor-level experts come from the immortal world all of a sudden? The underworld's cultivation was divided into 4 levels: Underworld Knight, Underworld Sage, Underworld Venerable, and Underworld Emperor, corresponding to the immortal world's minor immortal, exalted immortal, great immortal, and immortal emperor levels. The armored general's cultivation wasn't low, otherwise, he wouldn't have been sent to guard the underworld's entrance. After all, he was a late-stage underworld venerable, equivalent to a late-stage great immortal. However, since he couldn't see through their cultivation, these two were at least early-stage immortal emperor experts. The reason he was shocked wasn't because he was afraid of Yu Qianqiu Xian, but from Yu Qianqiu Xian's actions at the beginning, he was clearly wary of the underworld. However, the guy who came later was different. His cultivation was so high, why did he pretend to be weak? Based on his many years of experience, people who pretended to be weak were often the easiest to ignore, and often the scariest. So, seeing that the two didn't leave, he didn't dare to say anything. If he angered them, he wouldn't be able to handle it. Anyway, they came in with a token and didn't break any rules. So, he turned around and pretended he didn't see anything, displaying the style of an old fox who was good to everyone. So this is the underworld. Yu Qianqiu muttered softly. It was more or less different from what he imagined. He looked around and didn't know where to go. What do you want to do in the underworld? Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but ask the question in his heart. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and thought that it was a good idea to keep an expert by his side. After all, he knew nothing about the netherworld and was not in a hurry to get rid of him. He shook his head and sighed, "I dare not disobey the Celestial Emperor's decree." "Oh right, your heartless palace should have people doing business in the netherworld, right?" "Yes." Seeing that his tone had suddenly become gentle, Tsungin Xian recalled Meihi's words before he came, and immediately became vigilant. "What do you want?" "We can't run around aimlessly." Naturally, he had to gather some information first. As the chief high priest of Heartless Palace, you should be able to contact them, right? Yu Qianqiu asked seriously. In fact, his purpose was very simple. He came here to find Bai Changchun. To be more precise, he wanted to know whether Bai Changchun was dead or alive. Otherwise, he would feel very uncomfortable worrying about him every day. It was said that Bai Changchun had fought with the emperor of the underworld and fled into the boundless and mysterious land of darkness after his defeat. They had to find out which direction Bai Changchun had fled to. Otherwise, how would they find him? The guards at the entrance of the underworld shivered slightly, especially the armored general. He thought to himself, no wonder both of their cultivations are so high. One is here on the decree of the immortal emperor, the other is the chief high priest of the number one sect in the immortal world. But why did they come to the underworld? What do you want to find out? Tsangyin Axian asked suspiciously. Nothing much. Yu Qianqiu didn't think much of it. I just want to know the general situation of the underworld so that I can travel around and gain experience. Only with enough experience can I compose a good song. He wanted to say that he wanted to find Bai Changchun, but he couldn't say it out loud. First of all, it would scare Tsangyin Axian, and this was the territory of the emperor of the underworld. If he revealed it, wouldn't he be immediately targeted by the emperor of the underworld? Tsangyin Axian pondered for a moment and didn't want to say anything. However, this was the underworld after all, and it was very chaotic with various hegemons. This was the brat's first time here, so he didn't know anything. If he ran around with this brat and ended up in the lair of some powerful expert, then he would also be out of luck. After a moment of hesitation, he slowly said, "Follow me." Then, he took out his own flying shuttle and flashed onto it. Yu Qianqiu immediately flashed onto it as well. This time, there was no need to waste his breath on scheming. Tsangyin Axian took the initiative to act as a guide and pilot the flying shuttle. Although he wasn't familiar with the underworld, he had been here before. Compared to a rookie like Yu Qianqiu, he was much more familiar with it. He was mainly concerned about his own safety. He was afraid that Yu Qianqiu would take him to some lair. The flying shuttle sped northwest in the darkness. In fact, even Yu Qianqiu couldn't tell if they were going northwest or not. There were no sun, moon, or stars here, so there was no way to tell which direction they were going. However, when they exited the entrance of the underworld, they were facing forward. Then, according to the common sense of up north, down south, left, west, right, east, who knew which direction they were flying in? Yu Qianqiu even suspected that the people of the underworld didn't have any direction at all. Although the speed of the flying shuttle was very fast, it was obviously much slower than when they were flying in the immortal world. Tsangyin Axian stood at the front, maintaining a high degree of vigilance. His robe fluttered in the night, making him look extraordinary. In particular, his hands were hidden in his sleeves. Yu Qianqiu didn't doubt that if they encountered any unexpected situation, the hands hidden in his sleeves could pull out the Heartless Palace's three swords drawing technique at any time. It would definitely be earth-shattering. Yu Qianqiu kept looking around. The scenery of the underworld was not just a little worse than the immortal world. The main reason was that there was no scenery to see. Everywhere was dim and gloomy. From time to time, he would see streams of light dancing in the air. He didn't know what they were, but it was slightly mysterious. Occasionally, he could see the shadow of a huge black shadow flashing by. Judging by the shape, it should be the mountains of the underworld. "I say, High Consecrator Tsangyin, where are you taking me?" Yu Qianqiu had lost count of the number of times he had asked this question. The annoyed ash-gray cloud Axian finally spat out 4 words, "Twilight City." Twilight City. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. He felt that he had heard this name before, but he couldn't remember when he heard it. Normally, if he heard such a rare name in the immortal world, he would definitely remember who said it. Could it be an impression from his previous life? In his previous life, the underworld, which was the netherworld, had Twilight City. What kind of place is Twilight City? Is it a city? Why is it called Twilight City? He asked a lot of questions in one breath. Sungin Aksayan understood that if he didn't answer, this guy would continue to be annoyed. He looked around vigilantly and casually explained, "No one knows why it is called Twilight City, at least I don't know. Maybe someone knew in the past. Anyway, this name has existed for a long time. It is a city, and no one knows when it has existed. In short, many things in the underworld are too old to be judged by common sense. It is now a place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld. It is said that when the demon world was not sealed, the cultivators of the three realms would trade here. A place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. He searched his mind but had no memory of it. He couldn't help but wonder, since it is a place for trade between the immortal world and the underworld, why have I never heard of it in the immortal world? Sungin Aksayan sneered, "The rules of the underworld do not allow the people of the underworld to trade with the people of the immortal world. However, there are some things that both sides need, so the underworld palace turns a blind eye to it. However, no one would be stupid enough to openly provoke the underworld palace. If not stupid, then what is? What's more, Twilight City is not a place that ordinary immortal world sects can reach. It's not surprising that you don't know about it. If you don't ask, no one will talk about it." Sure enough, his foundation was shallow. He didn't know how many things he didn't know. Yu Qianqiu fell into silence for a while. Obviously, ordinary immortal world sects couldn't reach it because they would encounter many dangers on the way. With the strength of those small sects, it was indeed difficult to reach it safely. After a pause, he asked, "With your current speed, how long will it take to reach Twilight City from the entrance to the underworld?" "If it goes well, at least half a month," Sungin Aksayan said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu immediately let out a cold breath. The territory of the underworld was really wide. With Sungin Aksayan's speed, what kind of concept would it take half a month to fly? And this was under the condition that everything went well. What if it didn't? Just as he thought that things weren't going well, things were about to happen, the shuttle suddenly came to an abrupt stop, the powerful inertia throwing him out. Like a bolt of lightning, Ashiro Yun Aksayan grabbed his ankle, pulled him back, and threw him back into the cabin. Yu Qianqiu was immediately scared and shouted, "What do you want now?" "Shut up!" Sungin Aksayan shouted in a low voice, and his eyes quickly swept around. Yu Qianqiu immediately found that there was something wrong with his expression. He also looked around and found that there was a faint gray fog in the darkness. If he didn't look carefully, he wouldn't have noticed it. He immediately asked carefully, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong? We have been in this gray fog for several hours, and we are trapped by the formation." Sungin Aksayan pointed to the shadowy peaks around them, but when he said this, his expression was unusually calm, and his eyes were full of strong confidence. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu felt a lot more relieved. He suddenly said indifferently to the void, "I don't know which friend is playing a joke here. This Sungin Aksayan has accidentally disturbed this place. I hope this friend will be magnanimous and let us go. This Sungin Aksayan will be very grateful." Yu Qianqiu was not afraid. He could go back at any time. While he was looking around curiously, he suddenly heard laughter coming from all directions. He couldn't tell whether it was a man's voice or a woman's voice. It seemed to be far and close, and from time to time, it gave people the feeling that it was lying next to your ear and laughing. It was very strange. Yu Qianqiu hated people who played tricks in front of him the most. He immediately shouted, "Which old bastard dares to play tricks in front of Grandpa? Do you want to die?" Chapter 996. Sungin Aksayan was speechless. He tilted his head and looked over. You didn't even know whether the enemy was strong or weak, and you already started scolding him. If it was an expert that you couldn't afford to offend, you wouldn't even have the chance to regret it. However, Yu Qianqiu politely followed the routine and ignored him. Yu Qianqiu's strange laughter was suddenly cut off. He couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu again, guessing that he had been scolded to stop. Tsangyin Aksayan couldn't help but feel a little depressed. It seemed that this guy was always arrogant and didn't fear anyone, not just him. But if he didn't restrain himself in the netherworld, he would be implicated and killed by this guy sooner or later. Ignorant junior, how dare you speak such arrogant words? In a moment, this old man will definitely eat you up until not even your bones are left. The ethereal and traceless voice once again sounded from all directions. It seemed to be near yet far, and sometimes it seemed to be right beside one's ear. It's useless to talk nicely to this kind of pretentious person. He's just asking for a scolding. Look, he's exposed. What an old guy. Yu Qianqiu looked around and turned to ask Tsangyin Aksayan, with your ability, it shouldn't be a problem to take care of him, right? I didn't even see him, how would I know if there's a problem? Tsangyin Aksayan's face twitched. This kind of person was really not on the same level as him. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Yu Qianqiu didn't stand on ceremony. He took a step forward, stepped on the side of the ship, and waved his hand at the night sky, shouting, "Old bastard, I'm warning you, the person next to me is a top expert, Tsangyin Aksayan, the chief consecrator of the #1 sect in the celestial world, Heartless Palace. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and give way, or he won't be polite to you." He had never seen such a shameless person. Just as Greycloud Aksayan glared at him, the faintly discernible voice laughed and said, "I've heard of the Celestial Realm's Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing, but I've never heard of this or that. But even if the sect master of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, is here, so what? This is the netherworld, it's not the place for people from the celestial world to be arrogant." Yu Qianqiu immediately pointed around and shook his head at Tsangyin Aksayan, "This old thing is obviously looking down on you." In fact, Tsangyin Aksayan had already used his perception to scan the surroundings during this period of time. His eyes flickered as he looked around and said, "I have no enmity with Sir and do not wish to have any conflict with Sir. I hope that Sir will stop here, all right?" Yu Qianqiu's spirit was instantly lifted. He could hear a hint of an ultimatum in his words. It seemed like the show was about to start. "Stop." The faintly discernible voice giggled. "What a joke. I haven't even made a move." The center of the wave exploded into a splash of white water that was hundreds of meters high, charging straight at the flying shuttle above. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. He used the water art and slapped out with his palm. The violent wave of water immediately scattered in all directions, brushing past the flying shuttle and shooting even higher. Water was soft and could dissipate force. To be able to cause such a high wave, it was clear how powerful Tsangyin Aksayan's attack was. Then, Yu Qianqiu saw with his own eyes that the Netherworld River, which was nearly a kilometer wide, was almost cut off by Tsangyin Aksayan's sword. He could see the riverbed. Meanwhile, Tsangyin Aksayan's sword-drawing technique did not dissipate. It directly struck a huge mound of soil on the riverbed. "Ah!" A scream rang out. The Netherworld River, which had been cut off, was instantly submerged together with Tsangyin Aksayan. The dazzling light that was like a flash in the pan suddenly disappeared. There was a throbbing in the surrounding air. Yu Qianqiu looked around vigilantly. He saw that a large area of hazy gray fog was sizzling away and gathering in the Netherworld River below. It was as if there was a huge range hood installed in the Netherworld River. It seemed like the mirage mist array had been broken. Yu Qianqiu immediately clicked his tongue. He thought to himself that Tsangyin Aksayan was indeed an immortal emperor-level expert. He had solved the problem with a single attack. It was clean and efficient. He wondered if Tsangyin Aksayan had killed that demon. As he was pondering, he suddenly heard a soft, dong sound behind him. He turned around and saw a large hand quickly grabbing his neck. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He slapped back with his hand almost without hesitation. A group of purple meteors burst out and smashed the hand that was grabbing him into pieces on the spot. Ah! The person screamed, but he reacted quickly. The moment his hand was crippled, he teleported hundreds of meters away before the group of flying swords could hit him. He turned around and ran. At that moment, a blue stream of light rushed out of the water with a boom. It shot out diagonally and cut off the person's escape route. It was Tsungyin Axian. A thick gray fog suddenly burst out from the figure's body to obscure the eyes and ears of others. In an instant, it wrapped around Grey Cloud Axian and shot out from the gray fog, rushing towards the netherworld river below. As a bystander, Yu Qianqiu saw everything clearly. He immediately roared angrily, B****, you dare to sneak attack me? Don't run. The group of purple swords in the air chased after him. He didn't care about anything else. He threw down the flying shuttle and teleported to chase after him. It was more important to kill him first. He didn't know what kind of magical power that the thick gray fog had. It actually trapped Tsungyin Axian for a while. After Tsungyin Axian rushed out of the fog, he happened to see the flying shuttle in the air lose its momentum and fall. He waved his hand and kept the flying shuttle. His gaze suddenly looked down. Just as the person who was fleeing in panic entered the water, close to 100 purple flying swords shot into the water like cannons. Yu Qianqiu, who was in hot pursuit, shouted angrily, trying to run. As he gave chase, he fiercely sent out a palm strike. The surging netherworld river below instantly became sparkling and translucent. Tsungyin Axian's pupils shrank. He couldn't help but let out a cold breath. Although he had heard of the legend of Yu Qianqiu freezing the life and death mound in illusory immortal city, it wasn't as shocking as seeing it with his own eyes. A river that was close to 1,000 meters wide was instantly frozen. Great Immortal, please spare me. Great Immortal, please spare me. I know my mistake, I know my mistake. A sorrowful voice came from the glacier below. Yu Qianqiu landed on the ice. He looked down with a sinister gaze. He seemed to be considering whether or not to kill. Tsungyin Axian kept the sword in his hand and landed on the ice. He was speechless when he saw the crystal-clear situation below. The frozen person was surrounded by hundreds of purple flying swords. Some of the flying swords even stabbed into his body. If Yu Qianqiu hadn't stopped in time, that person would have been stabbed into a hedgehog. That person was actually depressed. He couldn't understand why the river suddenly froze. He was surrounded by hundreds of flying swords in just a short while. If it was an ordinary flying sword, he would not be afraid. However, he had already experienced these flying swords. Not only were they incomparably sharp, they seemed to be his natural nemesis. His cultivation was like nothing in front of them. Once he got close, he could feel a strong sense of suppression. Without a doubt, they could easily beat him into a cork. He had no way of blocking them. This person is a river clam that has cultivated successfully. His cultivation has reached the early stage of underworld venerable. It is equivalent to the early stage great immortal in the immortal world. Tsungyin Axian said indifferently. He had clearly seen the person's true form in the river. River clam. Early stage underworld venerable? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He seemed to understand something. He took a few steps forward. The ice under his feet melted and he quickly sank down. He landed in front of the pitiful man who was trapped and looked him up and down. The man was dark and skinny, and he didn't look old. His eyes were filled with fear and his pupils were spinning around. Other than the wounds caused by his flying swords, there were a few long bloody wounds. It was obvious that he was injured by Tsungyin Axian. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. He shook his sleeve and a small green bead appeared in his hand. He held it between two fingers and sent it to the person's mouth. He shouted, "Swallow it if you don't want to die." Chapter 997. It was already scary enough to be stabbed by so many flying swords. Now, he was forced to eat this strange thing. The person looked at the thing beside his mouth and said in fear, What is this?" He could already feel that this pearl had an aura similar to that of the flying swords that could suppress him. If he ate it, he would die. "You don't look like you want to eat it." Yu Qianqiu asked sinisterly. Close to 100 purple flying swords suddenly moved closer by an inch. The person immediately cried out, "I'll eat it, I'll eat it." His mouth was wide open. Yu Qianqiu flicked his finger, and the green pearl directly burrowed into the person's throat. The person coughed and looked at him in fear. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, "That's right. Don't ever think about forcing him out, and don't ever think about escaping. Otherwise, you will end up very badly." That bead was not something else, it was condensed from green fire. When Yu Qianqiu heard that the person was so weak despite having an early-stage netherworld venerable cultivation, he knew that part of the reason was that he had already been injured by Grey Cloud Axion, but the most important reason was that his own fire arts could restrain the person. Yu Qianqiu recalled the time when he used fire arts to suppress Ghost General Meng Yan in the Demon Ghost region. The extreme yang flames were the bane of ghosts and spirits, and they were very useful in the netherworld. Thus, he had a sudden idea and condensed a green fire pearl for the person to swallow. If the person was forced out by force, or escaped the range of the green fire pearl, then the green fire pearl would immediately explode into a fierce green fire in the person's stomach. It would be strange if this ghost-type netherworld monster did not turn into ashes. Yu Qianqiu's body flashed out of the glacier after he had placed a restriction on the other party. Nearly 100 purple flying swords broke through the ice and flew into his sleeves with a whoosh. Grey Cloud Axion stared at his sleeves for a while, then looked at the person in the ice cave and said, "What did you give him to eat? In any case, he's not a good person. If he dares to disobey, I'll make sure he doesn't even have the chance to cry." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. The people in the ice cave shuddered at his words. Suddenly, a sinister laugh was heard from above. "Stop playing dead down there. Get up here." Bang, bang. Whaw. Rumble. Strange sounds came from both ends of the Netherworld River. After the entire glacier trembled, it was finally unable to withstand the scouring of the Netherworld River. It broke away from the solidification of the two sides of the river and slowly floated downstream along with the Netherworld River. The glacier beneath their feet shook violently from time to time. Dense spiderweb-like cracks had already begun to appear. Yu Qianqiu and Song Yunxin stood firmly on top of it, watching the person climbing out of the hole in the ice. After that person carefully looked at the two of them, he realized that he couldn't see through their cultivation at all. It was obvious that they were both stronger than him. His entire face instantly turned bitter, and he silently cursed his bad luck. Previously, when he saw the speed of the two flying shuttles, he estimated that their cultivation should be similar to his. In addition, he saw that they were people from the celestial world and not locals, so he didn't take them seriously. In the end, he suffered such a disaster. Little did he know that Song Yunxin was being careful and didn't dare to fly too fast, but there were people who came to seek death. "Thou art of the Netherworld River's water tribe. We are flying in the air and have nothing to do with you. Why are you waiting for an opportunity to harm us?" Song Yunxin shouted coldly. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but glance at him. He realized that once this fellow came to the Netherworld, the way he spoke immediately changed. In the celestial world, he was very unscrupulous and arrogant. Here, no matter how ruthless he was, he always had a bit of a diplomatic tone. He was very similar to those people in his previous life, which made people a little uncomfortable. The person said weakly, "I really didn't mean to target you." Before you came, I had already set up the mirage mist formation, but you just happened to barge in. Stop your F***king nonsense. The netherworld isn't your home. Do you think it's reasonable for you to rob us here? That. Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose and asked, River Clam Demon, what's your name? From their tone, one could tell that the younger one was obviously not a kind person. The person immediately nodded and said, this lowly one is Xinyu. Xinyu. Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment. He realized that it was indeed a monster from the Netherworld River. Even its name was strange. Xinyu, tell me honestly. Why did you set up a formation here to harm people? River Clam Xinyu replied weakly, there are often people from the celestial world coming and going on this road. This lowly one is sick of the food in the Netherworld River, so I wanted to change my taste. Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xian's expressions twitched. They didn't expect to almost become food in someone else's mouth. At this moment, the glacier under their feet shook violently again, and the sound of ice cracking could be heard. The entire glacier continued to split into smaller pieces, and the ice beneath their feet flowed even faster. Were we trapped by his mirage mist formation for a few hours? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked Grey Cloud Xian. The latter nodded in confusion. Yu Qianqiu squinted at Xinyu and sneered. A few hours of delay, and now there's a burden. Hee hee. Xinyu, I can't vent my anger. Tell me, why should I spare your life? Xinyu panicked. He swallowed the bead but didn't dare to run. He waved his hand and denied, not a burden, not a burden. May I ask if the two of you are going to Twilight City? The two looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, how do you know? This lowly one only deduced it from the direction the two of you were flying in. As long as the two of you spare my life, I'm willing to take the two of you on the river. I won't be slower than the two of you in the air, Xinyu begged. He didn't doubt that Yu Qianqiu would kill him if he was unhappy. This Netherworld River connects to Twilight City. Yu Qianqiu confirmed with Grey Cloud Xian. Grey Cloud Xian nodded. Twilight City is indeed not far from the Netherworld River. Then hurry up. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and shouted. Xinyu had a green fire bead in his body, so he wasn't afraid of him playing tricks. Zhou Yu nodded in delight. He twisted his limbs and the wounds on his body healed at a visible rate. Even his palm, which had been blasted apart by the flying sword, had recovered to its original state. However, his dark face appeared somewhat pale. Clearly, this method of healing consumed a lot of his cultivation. Suddenly, Xinyu quickly retreated more than 10 meters on the glacier and crawled on the cracked ice. His body flickered, and a huge river clam appeared on the ice. It was dark brown and oval in shape. It was more than 10 meters long and 4 to 5 meters thick. It was very rare. Grey Cloud Xian was a knowledgeable person, but he couldn't help but exclaim, for a river clam to grow to your size, it must have cultivated for a long time. Yu Qianqiu was also amazed. He was a cultivator, so he knew that it was extremely difficult for this kind of shellfish to cultivate. It was many times more difficult than other animals. It was a miracle that it could grow to such a large size. Xinyu's voice came from the huge river clam. He smiled bitterly and said, I lived for 500,000 years in ignorance. Later on, my spiritual wisdom appeared, and after 500,000 years, I was lucky enough to find the knack of cultivation. After 200,000 years of cultivation, I have achieved what I have today. Great immortals, please get on my back. I will take you to Twilight City. Yu Qianqiu and Sungin Xian were shocked when they heard this. They looked at each other and then flashed to the back of the giant clam. Great immortals, sit tight. As soon as he finished his words, the oval-shaped giant clam started to move on its own at an extremely fast speed. With a swish, it slipped away on the ice surface. In the blink of an eye, it slid out of the ice and plunged into the cold Styx River. Its back was less than 1 meter above the water, but the surface area was more than 3 meters square. It was enough for Grey Cloud Xan and Yu Qianqiu to stand or sit. Shen Yu wasn't bragging. His speed in the water was indeed not slower than Grey Cloud Xan's flying shuttle. The two stood on his back and felt the coolness of the Styx River. They looked at the scenery of the underworld and felt refreshed. The strangest thing was that when such a huge river clam moved through the water, not a single splash was made. Not even the slightest sound could be heard. It could be seen that this old and experienced fellow in the Netherworld River was really good at manipulating water. Grey Cloud Xan suddenly looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. With his vast experience, he must have taken advantage of Yu Qianqiu and experienced the feeling of swimming in the Styx River for the first time. If he told the people of the Heartless Palace about this experience, they would definitely be fascinated. Everyone had vanity. It depended on which aspect it was. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that Grey Cloud Xan had such vain thoughts. After he recovered from his shock, he looked around and sat on the slightly protruding shell in the middle. He patted the shell and said, "Shen Yu, from what you said earlier, you've lived for at least 1.2 million years. I've lived for so many years in vain. I'm not as powerful as the two great immortals." Shen Yu was humbled to show that he had lived for so many years. Legend has it that the Styx River flowed through the entire underworld since ancient times. There are even rumors that say without the Styx River, there would be no underworld. There are even more exaggerated sayings that say without the Styx River, there would be no living beings in the three realms. Although these are all exaggerations, I think only such an ancient river can have living beings like you who have lived for millions of years. Grey Cloud Xan sighed as he faced the cool breeze of the Styx River. Then, he looked at his feet and said, "You can live for 500,000 years before your intelligence is developed. I think you must be an ancient mutant, similar to the fierce beasts in our celestial world. Otherwise, normal living beings can't live for so many years before their cultivation is complete." Hee hee. Great immortal, you flatter me. It would be great if I was an ancient mutant. Shen Yu smiled bitterly and said, "Ancient mutants that can live as long as me can more or less have a place in the Styx River with their talents and abilities. They won't wander around the Styx River like me." Chapter 998. You're not. Tsungyan Xan was taken aback at first, then exclaimed, "How is this possible? You haven't developed spiritual intelligence and haven't cultivated yet. How can you live for 500,000 years? Yu Qianqiu was also stunned. Although his cultivation level wasn't high in the immortal world, he still knew some basic knowledge about cultivation. If it wasn't a prehistoric ferocious beast, or an extremely special kind of ferocious beast that had accidentally devoured a now extinct heavenly treasure in a distant era, it was possible for it to live for hundreds of thousands of years with its strong physical body before it developed spiritual intelligence. Even so, it was still rare to hear of someone living over 500,000 years. Even those immortals had never heard of anyone who could live for more than 1,000,000 years. Of course, this wasn't to say that immortality was fake. It was just that the rise and fall of immortals were unpredictable. No one could predict what accidents would happen. It was as if there was some mysterious power that didn't allow a person to live forever. No matter how healthy one's physical body was, there would always be all kinds of calamities that forcefully took away one's life. The most common was fighting and killing for the sake of profit or grudges. This was the culprit that took away an immortal's life. Even immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who controlled the immortal world, and Underworld Emperor Bai Qi, who controlled the underworld, didn't live for more than 500,000 years. It should be known that 500,000 years was definitely not a small number when compared to the passing of time. I don't know why either. Shen Yu sighed. Yu Qianqiu and Tsungyan Xan glanced at each other. There was some suspicion in their eyes. They felt that this river clam was either bragging and hadn't lived for that long, or it didn't want to talk about it. Sungin Aksayan gave him a look, as if to ask him to continue. Maybe he could get something out of it. Yu Qiancho rolled his eyes, as if saying, I'm your enemy, why should I listen to you? Sungin Aksayan was speechless. In fact, Yu Qiancho had other thoughts in his mind. This Jiu Yu's life is in my hands. If he really has a secret that he can't keep to himself, then it must be a big secret. I'm the only one who knows about it. Why should I let Grey Cloud Faith know about it? Both sides of the Netherworld River were gloomy. From time to time, specks of flowing light would dance in the air. Serpent carried the two of them and rode the waves without slowing down. The rolling waves of the Netherworld River retreated quickly like smoke. However, the waves in front of them came again, and they could not see the end of the waves. It was unknown when Sungin Aksayan had also sat down. He sat back to back with Yu Qiancho. The two of them were silent as they sensed the heroic and vicissitudes of the Netherworld River. Looking at both sides of the river, there were sometimes plains, sometimes mountains, and sometimes gloomy valleys. Although they could not see clearly, the feeling of vastness made their hearts tremble. This feeling was indescribable. Yu Qiancho, a newbie who had just arrived in the Netherworld, didn't think much of it. He felt that the Netherworld should be like this. On the other hand, Sungin Aksayan, who had been to the Netherworld several times, sighed with emotion. He did not expect to see the Netherworld in a completely different way when he traveled quickly on this ancient Netherworld River. It was as if only the Netherworld River understood the Netherworld the best. This was because every section of the winding river was created by it. It was washed and settled by the endless years. It was an ancient and gloomy beauty of vicissitudes. Perhaps darkness was the most primitive beauty. The Netherworld River was sometimes wide and sometimes narrow. However, the widest part was still a few hundred meters wide. Yu Qiancho, who was looking at the scenery with his elbows on his knees and his palms supporting his chin, suddenly asked, Serpent, how wide is the widest part of the Netherworld River? I've tried to cross the widest part once before. However, I walked and stopped from time to time and often changed directions. It took me a few years, Serpent replied seriously. I'm afraid that with my current speed, I'll need to swim for more than a month to get from the other side to this side. I'm not sure how wide it is exactly. So wide. Yu Qiancho and Sungin Aksayan exclaimed at the same time. Obviously, it was Sungin Aksayan's first time hearing about it. The two of them suspected that Serpent was born to boast. He said that he had lived for more than 1,000,000 years, and now he said that he had created such a wide river. Was this really a river? It was more like a sea. Yu Qiancho licked his lips and chuckled. I say, Serpent, you might have misunderstood me. You've mistaken the length of the Netherworld River for its width. I'm talking about the distance between us now. Ha! Great deity, you might think that I'm old and confused, but I'm not so old that I can't tell the difference between length and width. Speaking of the length of the Netherworld River, it's not something we can reach in a month with our current speed. Serpent sighed. Take the direction we're going now. If everything goes smoothly, it will take half a month to reach Twilight City. Then, we'll have to walk for another month before we can reach the endless horizon, and this is under the condition that everything goes smoothly. Endless horizon. Yu Qiancho turned around and asked Sungin Aksayan, do you know that place? Sungin Aksayan also turned around and nodded. I've heard of that place, but I've never been there. It seems that the people from the Netherworld that I've come into contact with are quite afraid of that place, and no one is willing to talk about it too much. That place is known as the punishment land of the Netherworld, so of course they're afraid. Serpent laughed and continued. Speaking of the endless horizon, you should be able to imagine that the distance that the Netherworld River traverses through is already incredibly long when you hear the word endless. After passing through the endless horizon, it's the boundless and mysterious land of darkness. I'm afraid no one knows how long the Netherworld River is there. Yu Qianqiu and Sangyan Axian immediately gasped when they saw something specific for comparison. They finally understood how long the Netherworld River was. Its length was a concept that was very, very long, as if it was very far away, but no one could tell exactly how long it was. This was the length of the Netherworld River. While Sangyan Axian was still in shock, Yu Qianqiu was already distracted. This was because Serpent mentioned the boundless and mysterious land of darkness. Rumor had it that Bai Changchun escaped to that place when he was being chased by the Emperor of the Netherworld. In this way, there was no need to go to Twilight City to inquire about the information. According to Serpent, they could just follow the Netherworld River and cross the endless horizon to reach there. But then again, since it was along the way, there was no harm in going to Twilight City to take a look. If the World Commerce Chamber really grew stronger one day, they would inevitably have to deal with that place. It was a good thing for him to explore the situation first, but that endless horizon, Serpent, what do you mean when you say that the endless horizon is the land of punishment in the Netherworld? Yu Qianqiu smiled. Also, you said that they are naturally afraid, but from what you said, you don't seem to be afraid at all. Ha! Serpent explained with a smile, the Netherworld is not as stable as the immortal world. You must have heard of the degree of chaos here. Many restless people who offend the Netherworld Royal Palace will be captured and sent to the endless horizon for punishment. Their dantian will be sealed so that they can't self-destruct or use their cultivation. They will be forced to do all kinds of hard labor day and night until they die of exhaustion. This kind of punishment is quite cruel to criminals. Many criminals can't stand this endless torture and commit suicide. However, this is the Netherworld. Even if you commit suicide, there are ways to imprison your primordial spirit and soul, reforge your body, and let you be reborn with your memory. You will continue to suffer until you die of exhaustion. This is called living a life worse than death. Begging for life, begging for death. The endless horizon also has another meaning, which is endless torture. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xian were silent. They didn't think that the so-called endless horizon was such a den of demons. They had never heard of such a way of punishment. The two of them could imagine the misery and suffering that the prisoners who were imprisoned there had to go through. Just imagine, even the right to die was taken away. Such a cruel punishment made the two of them shudder and their scalps go numb just thinking about it. As for why I'm not afraid of the endless horizon, it's because the Netherworld Royal Palace has no right to punish us. The Netherworld Royal Palace and the Netherworld Royal Palace have an agreement that we will not invade each other. If the people of the land invade us, we will report to the Netherworld Royal Palace and ask them to give us an explanation. Similarly, if we invade the people of the land, they will also report to us and we will also have to give them an explanation. I've heard of this. Grey Cloud Xian interrupted. That's why I found it strange that the Netherworld Royal Palace would attack us. We didn't defend you. You are from the immortal realm. Naturally, you are not included in the agreement between the Netherworld Royal Palace and the Netherworld Royal Palace. Zhou Yu said weakly, his voice much softer. Grey Cloud Xian and Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but look at each other. This reason was simple and sufficient. Who asked them to not be from the Netherworld Royal Palace? Ha! Yu Qianqiu stood up and looked at Grey Cloud Xian. Isn't the Netherworld Emperor in charge of the entire Netherworld? Why is there an exception for the Netherworld Royal Palace? Grey Cloud Xian shook his head and said, I don't know. In any case, I heard that if the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace touch the Netherworld Royal Palace for no reason, they will be severely punished. Even most of the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace don't know why. But... As he said this, he lifted his heel and knocked on the shell. Since you have lived for so many years, you must have more experience than the people of the Netherworld Royal Palace. Moreover, you are one of the Netherworld Royal Palace's people. I'm sure you can answer our questions. Hee hee. Zhou Yu laughed proudly. This reason shouldn't be hard to guess. Since it is not under the Netherworld Emperor's control, it is naturally because he can't control it. Hearing this, the two looked at each other again. This reason was indeed simple, but it was also reasonable. It was just that people had thought too much about it and had confused themselves. But once they faced the truth, they realized that it was not a trivial matter. Yu Qianqiu said suspiciously, could it be that there is an expert in the Netherworld Royal Palace that even the Netherworld Emperor fears? Chapter 999. I don't know if there are any powerful cultivators in the Underworld River that even the Emperor of the Underworld is afraid of, Shen Yu said slowly. Said Zhou Yu unhurriedly and slowly, but I know that in those broad areas of the Styx River, many aquatic creatures have lived much longer than me. I think there must be some powerful ones among them. His words were useless. Sunyan Axayan and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other and felt that this clam was not very honest. He had lived in the Underworld River for millions of years. How could he not have heard of the powerful cultivators in the Underworld River? Even if he hadn't heard of all of them, he must have heard of some of the more famous ones. But he used, I think, to brush us off. Sure enough, he was insatiable after we showed him some respect. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth curled up into a sneer. Just as he was about to show Shen Yu how powerful he was, he saw that the Netherworld River basin in front of him suddenly opened like the mouth of a kettle. It was as if it had instantly rushed into the vast sea. At the same time, Shen Yu slowed down until he completely stopped, floating quietly in the Underworld River. An arched mountain appeared on the surface of the river in front of him. The mountain was 100 meters high, and the belly of the mountain was empty. The water rolled through the belly of the mountain, and the foot of the mountain on both sides seemed to be in the Underworld River. Rather than a mountain, it was more like an open door, giving people a feeling that it led to an unpredictable future. There were scattered fluorescent stars dancing in the sky from all directions, as if they had been summoned by some mysterious force. They all flew toward the hollow mountain and the Underworld River. Finally, they gathered and hovered in the hollow belly of the mountain. For a moment, they looked like countless glowing beads hanging on the water surface, sparkling under the reflection of the river. It was dark all around, except for this place, which was the only bright pearl in the entire underworld, embedded in the belly of the mountain. It was so beautiful. Sunyan Axayan and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other, not knowing what it meant. Coincidentally, a fist-sized ball of fluorescent light flew past the two of them. So, Yu Qianqiu took out a long sword and stabbed the ball of fluorescent light as if he was stabbing a roast chicken. Grey Cloud Axion instantly rolled his eyes, and he cursed in his heart, isn't this kid a little too audacious? He attacked blindly before he figured out the situation. This is the Netherworld. Don't you want to live anymore? But since he had already done that, Grey Cloud Axion craned his neck over to take a look. He saw that there was actually a fist-sized firefly stuck in the tip of the sword. It had a ferocious appearance, and its jaws were as thick as a thumb. The ball of light trailing behind it was abnormally bright, and under the illumination of its tail, it was impossible to see what it was unless one took a closer look. F***CKU. I was wondering what it was, so it's a firefly. It's rare to see such a big one. Yu Qianqiu snorted. Grey Cloud Axion also nodded slightly. So it was a firefly, so there shouldn't be any trouble. He was finally relieved. Just as the firefly was struggling in pain after its chest was pierced by the sword, a group of fast-moving streams of light in the distance seemed to have been attracted by the strange scene here. They immediately changed their direction and flew over quickly. Not long later, more than 100 people appeared in the sky, looking at the strange scene in the belly of the mountain. Grey Cloud Axion looked at those people and frowned slightly. It's the people from Hidden Dragon Villa. The moment he spoke, those people immediately turned around. When they saw Grey Cloud Axion and Yu Qianqiu, they were all stunned. The person in the lead took the lead and flashed over, and the others also flashed over. The person in the lead cupped his hands and said, "So it's Heartless Palace's High Priest Grey. Prime Minister Ding greets you." Grey Cloud Exayan cupped his hands perfunctorily and said, "So it's Hidden Dragon Villa's Elder Ding." With that, he proudly turned his head to the side. Everyone didn't pay much attention to his arrogant actions. With his cultivation, he was completely qualified. What everyone admired most was that this Grey Cloud Exayan was really skilled and bold. He actually dared to stand in the Netherworld River and look at the scenery as if nothing had happened. He completely ignored the danger that could appear at any time. How bold! Everyone mistakenly thought that the two of them were standing on a rock in the Netherworld River. For a moment, no one noticed that there was a giant river clam floating in the water below. Everyone's gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. After a moment of suspicion, Ding Xiang cupped his hands and asked, "Could this be World Commerce's Yu Qianqiu, the sect leader?" From this, it could be heard that they had also heard about Grey Cloud Exayan protecting Yu Qianqiu. Grey Cloud Exayan's expression twitched when he heard that. That's right. Yu Qianqiu held his sword and cupped his hands to return the greeting. "I've long heard of Hidden Dragon Villa's Elder Ding's great name. Seeing you today, you truly live up to your reputation. Elder Ding, please take care of me in the future." This fellow had never heard of Ding Xiang. However, since they had met without enmity, it wasn't tiring to be sweet. It would be a waste not to say nice things. Hee hee. I've been representing Hidden Dragon Villa in the Netherworld for a long time. I'm not famous in the immortal world. On the other hand, I've heard of sect leader Yu's reputation in the Netherworld. Ding Xiang smiled modestly. However, looking at the smile on his face, he should be really happy. Everyone liked to hear nice words. The Hidden Dragon Villa group looked at Yu Qianqiu with more kindness. Their gazes more or less looked at the firefly stuck in Yu Qianqiu's sword. After Yu Qianqiu noticed it, he immediately wiped his sword with 2 fingers and flicked the dimming firefly into the water. He then put away the sword in his hand. At this moment, there was a splash on the water's surface. Everyone's gaze turned to the water's surface not far from Yu Qianqiu. The water rippled, and a round mouth suddenly appeared underwater. It swallowed the firefly that Yu Qianqiu had flicked to the surface. After this unknown thing swallowed the firefly, it quickly turned around and dived back into the water. As it turned around, everyone could faintly see black scales. They didn't know what monster it was. "There's something in the river," Ding Xiang shouted softly. The group of people coordinated well and instantly teleported to a higher position in the sky. They stared at the river below with shining eyes. Yu Qianqiu was also startled. He pulled out the sword he had just put away and was on guard. A sword also appeared in Grey Cloud Exayan's hand. He coldly swept his gaze over the river, but there was no longer any movement on the river. "Shenyu, didn't you notice that there was something in the water just now?" Yu Qianqiu asked as he patted Shenyu's shell with his foot. "Don't worry, this is a nether river black carp. It won't hurt you," Shenyu said excitedly. "Nether river black carp? You mean the thing in the water was a carp?" "Yes." The conversation between the two fell into the ears of the people in the air, and it immediately caused a burst of surprise. It turned out that there was a living thing under their feet. When they looked carefully, they found that it actually faintly looked like the outline of a clam. There was such a big clam. Even though this group of people often traveled the netherworld, they had never seen such a huge clam. Yu Qianqiu could hear the excitement in Shenyu's voice. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Shenyu, why did you suddenly stop here? Is something going to happen?" "That's right," Shenyu said excitedly, "Dragon Transformation Gate. It's a legendary spectacle that only appears once every 100,000 years. I didn't expect to see it. This is such a great fate. If we can witness the legendary scene of transforming into a dragon, we will be honored. Everyone could feel the rare excitement in his words, especially the two words, dragon transformation, which made everyone's spirits rise. However, they still didn't understand what he meant. Yu Qianqiu looked around curiously and said, Xinyu, be clear. Who is transforming into a dragon? Of course it's the Nether River Black Carp. Xinyu said excitedly, the mountain gate in front is called the Dragon Transformation Gate. Legend has it that it will summon the black carp from the river Styx once every 100,000 years. If a black carp can leap over the dragon gate, it can transform into a black dragon and leave. Of course, this is only a legend. Many people wanted to witness such a spectacle, but they always returned in disappointment. They did not see the Nether River Black Carp being summoned by the Dragon Transformation Gate. As time passed, no one believed in this legend. I didn't expect to see it this time. This is a great opportunity. Everyone was shocked when they heard that. They did not expect such a miraculous thing to happen. Yu Qianqiu vaguely felt that this story was familiar. After being stunned for a while, he exclaimed in shock, there's a carp leaping over the dragon gate here too. As soon as these words came out, everyone's gazes focused on him, each of them filled with suspicion. Sungyan Axian knew he would not get an answer, but he could not help but ask, where did you see a carp leaping over the dragon gate? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. After his expression twitched awkwardly, he chuckled and said, I've never seen such a mysterious thing before. I just think it's a little ridiculous. Could it be that a carp can really transform into a dragon after crossing the dragon gate? Sungyan Axian looked at him up and down suspiciously. He paused and said, the mystery of the netherworld cannot be predicted with common sense. Since there is such a legend, there must be a reason for it. Hee. I hope that's the case. Then we'll have a feast for our eyes. Yu Qianqiu laughed perfunctorily. Seeing that everyone was looking at him with twinkling eyes, he stomped his foot and changed the topic. Xinyu, you just mentioned some great opportunity. Even if the black carp leaped over the dragon gate and transformed into a dragon, what does it have to do with us? You can't say that. Xinyu's tone was filled with yearning. Legend has it that among those who witnessed the black carp transforming into a dragon, there would always be someone who would form a good relationship with the black dragon and receive the black dragon's blessing in the future. Don't you think it's a great opportunity? I see. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his chin and muttered. Suddenly, he felt that the sword in his hand was unusually dazzling. How could a good relationship be related to a weapon? He quickly put it away. Beside him, Sungyan Axian also put away his sword. In short, everyone's eyes flickered with excitement. They were all dreaming of the legendary spring and autumn period. Bang! With a deafening sound, a bolt of purple lightning suddenly pierced through the night sky and directly struck the pitch-black and bare mountain gate. The gate was covered in purple lightning for a long time before disappearing. While everyone was still in shock, they suddenly felt a majestic and ancient aura slowly spread out from the mountain gate that stood in the water like a ripple. It was so frightening. Chapter 1000. At that moment, everyone seemed to have an illusion. The ancient and majestic aura that spread out like a ripple seemed to be mixed with an obscure Sanskrit incantation that was whispering in everyone's ears. The voice seemed to come from above the 9 heavens, but it also seemed to have traveled through ancient times. The ancient and sacred voice lingered in everyone's mind, making them have the urge to worship the mountain gate in the Netherworld River. However, what was strange was that when everyone woke up and tried to listen carefully to what was chanting in their ears, they realized that there was no sound at all. When they relaxed, they could immediately hear the chanting of the Sanskrit incantation again. It was abnormally magical and mysterious, making it difficult for them to understand what was going on. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and felt as if someone was hypnotizing him. He focused his attention and stared at the mountain gate. He asked suspiciously, Shinyu, did you hear that? What's going on? I heard it, but I don't know what's going on. It's also my first time experiencing this, Shinyu said with a confused tone. The mountain gate was 100 meters tall, and the hole at its belly was 40 to 50 meters tall and wide. The countless fireflies that gathered there suddenly became chaotic. The surface of the water around the mountain gate was stirred, and a large group of black carps of various sizes appeared. They floated below the water and kissed the surface of the water. Their black tails and dorsal fins stirred the water from time to time. Everyone looked at each other. At that moment, everyone could see clearly that they were indeed black carps. They could not help but have more confidence in the legend of the carps leaping over the dragon's gate. The densely packed black carps that suddenly appeared in a chaotic manner immediately became orderly after a moment of chaos. They all circled around the entire mountain gate with their heads and tails in a circle. After swimming for a few laps, another river black carp that was almost 2 meters long suddenly broke away from the parade and jumped out of the water. Like an arrow, it charged at the center of the hollow mountain gate and dived into the dancing fluorescent lights. Shaking its head and wagging its tail, it opened its mouth and swallowed quite a few fist-sized fireflies before it finally lost its momentum and fell into the water with a splash. After one took the lead, the netherworld river black carps that were patrolling behind immediately followed suit. One by one, they leaped out of the water and shot into the group of fireflies that had gathered at the center of the mountain gate. After biting the fireflies, they drew an arc in the air and fell into the netherworld river. Not long after, the sound of water flowing out and falling into the water could be heard, rising and falling like rain. Such a spectacle was rarely seen. One should know that those who came from the celestial world would be warned by their seniors to abide by one rule, which was to try not to provoke the water race in the netherworld river. However, this guy was too bold. Sangyin Aksayan was stunned. "Yu Qiancho, what are you trying to do? Let it go quickly. Don't cause any trouble." "What trouble can there be? There are millions of netherworld river black carps here. Didn't I just catch a carp?" Yu Qiancho licked his lips. "Although it's a little dark, it must have a unique flavor." His meaning could not be more obvious. He wanted to taste the netherworld river black carp. Shin Yu, who was stunned, immediately came back to his senses and exclaimed, "Great immortal, quickly let him go." Yu Qiancho stomped his foot on the shell and snorted. "When King wanted to eat us, why weren't you so polite? I just wanted to eat a carp of your water race. What are you so anxious about? If you don't want to die, shut up." "Wah! Let me go." A child's voice came. Yu Qiancho's eyes immediately widened. The fin that was in his hand turned into a small, tender arm. The netherworld river black carp that was tied up by the fishing line turned into a little boy wearing a black dudu. The little boy had a small braid on his head, and there was an intricately crafted golden chain around his neck. He was currently struggling on the fishing line, looking at Yu Qiancho with a horrified expression. F***ck. Yu Qiancho cried out in alarm and immediately let go of the little arm he was grabbing. He looked at the little boy struggling on the fishing rod in a daze. He was not primitive enough to eat humanoid animals. At the same time, he faintly felt that he was in trouble. Sangyin Aksayan carefully sized up the little boy. He realized that he was already at the final stage of the tribulation transcendent stage at such a young age. He could transform. Clearly, he was a demon from the netherworld river. He did not know what kind of treasure Yu Qiancho's fishing rod was. The thin fishing line could tie up a tribulation transcendent stage demon, but the demon could not break free. He immediately rolled his eyes at Yu Qiancho and shouted in a low voice, "You're crazy, kid. Why aren't you letting him go?" The little boy saw that he could not escape after struggling for a while. His tender voice pierced through the night sky. "Big sister, save me." There was still help. Yu Qianqiu sweated profusely as he looked at the surrounding water. He lifted the fishing rod, and the little boy was immediately pulled over. He clamped the little boy's arm with the fishing rod and covered the little boy's mouth with his other hand. He squeezed out a kind smile and said, "Don't shout. I mean you no harm." Unexpectedly, the little boy looked as if he had seen his grandmother wolf. He became even more panicked and struggled desperately. Anyone who was tied up, clamped under the arm, and covered with his mouth would not believe that the other party did not mean them any harm. At this moment, the surface of the water 100 meters ahead suddenly bubbled with a diameter of 2 to 3 meters. It seemed like something was going to emerge from the water. Yu Qianqiu could clearly feel Shin Yu trembling under his feet. It was slowly retreating. The people in the air were shocked. Gray Cloud Xian's expression changed as well. He hid his hands in his sleeves and was on guard. It seemed like the Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique could erupt at any time. Yu Qianqiu also panicked. His eyes darted around, and he suddenly bent down to whisper in the little boy's ear, "I really don't mean you any harm. Do you want to make the great leap and become a black dragon?" Although he was in a desperate situation, he finally felt the pulse accurately. The little boy under his arm stopped struggling and obediently let him hold him. He stared at him with wide eyes blinking. Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, "As long as you stop shouting, I have a way to help you make the great leap. What do you think?" The little boy immediately nodded even though his mouth was covered. Yu Qianqiu then slowly tried to move his hand away. Seeing that the little boy was very obedient and was looking at him expectantly, he glanced at the water column that was already several meters high on the surface of the Netherworld River like a fountain. He immediately untied the little boy in a flurry and hid the fishing rod quickly. Then, he picked up the little boy with his heart thumping. He pretended to be relaxed and smiled as if he was looking at the scenery. "What's your name?" The little boy hugged his neck and replied in a childish voice, "My name is Xiao Yuan." "What's your name?" Yu Qianqiu immediately chuckled proudly. "My name is Yu Qianqiu. It means you as in leaping over the dragon's gate. Don't you think we're fated? You can just call me Brother Yu." The little boy's eyes lit up. He nodded and said, "Brother Yu." When he said that, Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed into a line. He thought to himself, that was close. Is that even possible? Many of the people from the hidden Dragon Mountain villa in the air swayed. They looked at each other speechlessly, as if they couldn't accept this reality. Sunyan Axian looked at the little boy who was being intimate with Yu Qianqiu as if he was looking at an idiot. He thought to himself, no matter what, he's at the end of the tribulation stage, so he shouldn't be too young. How could he be so retarded and so easily fooled? What the hell? Shin Yu, who had been slowly retreating, also shivered. He stabilized his body in the water and stopped retreating. Everyone's attention was then attracted by the water column that was more than 10 meters high. In the middle of the water column, a graceful and beautiful woman in black slowly rose. Her bright eyes suddenly looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was holding the little boy. Chapter 1001. Xiao Yuan. A voice as clear as spring water rang out. The beautiful black-clothed woman looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. She didn't seem to know this person, but why? The boy in Yu Qianqiu's arms immediately waved his hand happily and shouted, "Big sister, come here quickly." Damn it! Why did you call your sister here? Yu Qianqiu smiled guiltily and said, "Xiao Yuan, is this your sister?" The boy nodded and said, "She's my third sister." "Is she beautiful?" "Beautiful. Hee hee. So beautiful." Yu Qianqiu couldn't stop praising. But Song Yunxin secretly transmitted his voice to him, "This woman is a late-stage underworld supreme. I'm afraid she's not simple. Be careful." The water spouting from the netherworld river slowly descended and disappeared behind the surface of the water. The graceful and beautiful woman walked over on the water with light steps. Although her steps were slow, they had the essence of shrinking the ground into inches. Her movements seemed to be neither too fast nor too slow as she leisurely walked forward. Each step was like a dream. She had already advanced several dozen meters and arrived in front of Yu Qianqiu in just a few steps. The lady's hair was tied up high and her hair reached her waist. Although her appearance was not bad, it was still inferior to Lu Yanqing and Ji Wu. However, her calm temperament was not something ordinary people could see. She was quiet and serene, giving people an indescribable feeling. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu and Song Yunxin suddenly looked down at their feet. The clan had silently dived into the water. The two had no choice but to stand on the water surface. Yu Qianqiu wanted to question Ji Yu, but he wanted to maintain his demeanor. He cursed in his heart, "Try running if you have the guts." In fact, Ji Yu didn't want to run either. He turned into his human form and emerged from the water surface. He bowed to the lady walking on the water surface and said, "Greetings, third princess." Ji Yu. The lady frowned slightly. The two obviously knew each other. She just didn't expect Ji Yu to turn into his human form. Third princess. Such a big background. Yu Qianqiu and Song Yunxian looked at each other. The woman's gaze then fell on the two of them. When she realized that she couldn't see through their cultivation, she was slightly startled and said, "You two are?" Without waiting for the two to reply, the water in front of them spewed out several water columns in succession. Several good-looking men and women appeared at the top of the water columns. The way they appeared was much more intense than the third princess's appearance. The men and women all had an extraordinary aura. Although the style of their clothes was different, they were all black. Judging from their appearance and behavior, it was obvious that they were of noble birth. They first stared at the mountain gate for a while, then looked around and saw that the third princess was actually standing together with two people from the immortal world. They were all stunned, especially when they saw that Xiao Yuan was being carried by one of them, and they were even more surprised. When they realized that they couldn't see through the cultivation of the two visitors from the immortal world, they all lowered the water heads and flashed over. Shen Yu's face was filled with fear as he bowed repeatedly, "Greetings to the Crown Prince, Second Crown Prince, Third Crown Prince, Princess, Second Princess." He bowed to all of the 5 men and women that came after him. These people have different levels of cultivation, but they are all at the level of a nether lord. I wonder which royal family they are from in the river Styx's water tribe. How impressive. Before Song Yunxian could finish transmitting his voice to Yu Qianqiu, the boy in Yu Qianqiu's arms suddenly shouted at Ji Yu in a childish voice, "I am the 4th Crown Prince of the Li Palace. Why don't you greet me?" Everyone fell silent when they heard this. The people of the Hidden Dragon Mountain Manor and Song Yunxian all looked at Yu Qianqiu with strange gazes. Little did they know that every hair on Yu Qianqiu's face froze. He was speechless. He didn't expect that the fish he had casually caught with his fishing rod would be the 4th Crown Prince of the Li Palace. Now, he was even being carried by his father. What a coincidence. Heavens! What kind of joke is this? Xiao Yuan, don't be rude. When father and mother are here, we will punish you for leaving the palace without permission. The third princess who came first shouted. Her words undoubtedly confirmed the child's identity. Xiao Yuan, who was in Yu Qianqiu's arms, pouted, while Yu Qianqiu looked at the child in his arms with a twitching expression. He wanted to cry but no tears came. 7 Netherlord experts came, and 2 old fellows were coming. You unlucky child, why did you sneak out without permission? If you didn't sneak out, would I have been able to catch you with my fishing rod? Now, he wanted to grab this child and slap him. A disobedient child was too annoying. The most painful thing was that his words just now were to fool this child. How would he know how to jump the dragon gate? If he directly jumped over, with this child's tribulation passing stage cultivation, there would be no problem at all. Not to mention the group of Netherlord experts in front of him. How could a mere height of 100 meters stop them? Clearly, there was something else that he didn't know. If he was exposed and he escaped first, who knew if these people would be able to kill Tsangyin Aksayan? Yu Qianqiu thought. Jiu Yu's speechless gaze retracted from Yu Qianqiu's face. He bowed to Xiao Yuan and said, "Greetings, fourth crown prince." Xiao Yun immediately looked at the third princess, who stopped him and chuckled. The boss, who was addressed as crown prince by Jiu Yu, looked at Tsangyin Aksayan and Yu Qianqiu coldly. He cupped his fists and said, "I am Li Zhong, the crown prince of the Li Palace of the Styx River. May I know how to address the two experts from the immortal world? I presume you are not nameless people from the immortal world." Before he could reply, there was another movement in the Styx River. The loud noise attracted everyone's attention. Suddenly, a white wave surged into the sky from afar. After the wave passed, thousands of black-armored mighty soldiers holding long spears or swords at their waists rose from the water. In the middle, there was a sturdy and ugly single-horned water rhinoceros with a splendid carriage on it. Two dignified and noble-dressed people who looked like a couple sat on it. The two armored soldiers who were in the front row waved their long whips in a circle and suddenly shook them. A paw sound rang through the night sky. A group of people immediately rode the waves and came over. It was not a small show. Yu Qianqiu and the others were not fools. They could guess who had come. It was probably the father and mother of the princes and princesses in front of them. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Tsangyin Aksayan. He was very hesitant. Should he leave? But if he ran now, it would be difficult for him to survive in the underworld in the future. The people of the Hidden Dragon Manor in the air had already quickly moved far away. They stood in the air and watched. It was fine if they could not see clearly. Not causing trouble was the most important thing. After the group of water race soldiers arrived in front of them, a wave surged in the middle and separated to the two sides, creating an empty passage. The entire passage was filled with snow-white waves. The sturdy single-horned water rhinoceros slowly stepped on the waves and stopped about 10 meters away from the group. The princes and princesses of the Li Palace all knelt down on one knee. Even Xiao Yuan, who was in Yu Qianqiu's arms, broke free and bowed in unison. "We pay our respects to father and mother." Shen Yu also knelt down and bowed. "We pay our respects to your majesty and empress." The dignified, round-faced man with a long beard waved his hand and said, "All of you may rise." Yu Qianqiu and Tsangyin Aksayan only cupped their hands and bowed. After all, the two of them were subordinates of the immortal world's Grand Commander Jin. In the underworld, they would at most pay their respects to the Emperor of the underworld. It was not good for others to be overly courteous. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, had a stomach full of doubts. What was going on with the Emperor of the underworld? He was too much of an Amitabha. He did not care about the appearance of an emperor. At this moment, the noble lady on the carriage waved her hand and said, "Xiao Yuan." Xiao Yuan immediately flashed behind Yu Qianqiu, not daring to show his face. Clearly, he was afraid of being punished for leaving the palace without permission. In this way, Yu Qianqiu did not know whether to laugh or cry. The gazes of the emperor and empress of the Li Palace were all focused on him. It was hard for him not to attract attention. Tsangyin Aksayan also secretly transmitted his voice. "These two have reached the intermediate stage of the Emperor of the Underworld. Do not underestimate them." The two people on the carriage immediately sized up Yu Qianqiu and Tsangyin Aksayan. Tsangyin Aksayan's intermediate stage of the Emperor of the Immortal World had already shocked them. It should be known that in the immortal world, immortal emperors would not casually come to the underworld. However, when they discovered that they could not see through Yu Qianzhou's cultivation, they were shocked. Logically speaking, this person's cultivation had clearly reached the advanced stage of the Emperor of the immortal world. Otherwise, they would have been able to see through his cultivation. Could it be that in the immortal world, besides immortal Emperor Jin Tai, there was someone else who had reached the advanced stage of the Emperor of the immortal world? Why had they never heard of him? It should be known that it was very difficult for the people of the immortal world to find out about the underworld river's water race, but it was not difficult for the underworld river's water race to find out about the immortal world. After all, it was easy for one side to send their subordinates to the shore in human form, but it was difficult for the people on the shore to disguise as the water race to the underworld river. The two looked at each other and stood up. Although the underworld river's water race did not have much contact with the immortal world, they did not dare to be careless. At the very least, they had to be courteous. This immediately shocked the crown princes and princesses. They all turned to look at the two. They did not dare to be disrespectful to people who could be treated like this by their imperial father and imperial mother. Shen Yu looked at the two of them with trepidation and thought to himself, where did these two come from? The two cupped their hands. The dignified man smiled, I am the lord of the Li Palace of the underworld river, Li Guang. I did not know that there were experts from the immortal world here. I wonder how I should address you two experts? Yu Qianzhou glanced at Sangyin Xan and thought, even if I told them about my small sect, they probably would not know. Sangyin Xan maintained the demeanor of a large sect. He raised his hand to return the greeting and said loudly, I am Sangyin Xan from the immortal world's passionless palace. Greetings, Your Majesty, Empress. So you are the chief consecrator of the number one sect in the immortal world, passionless palace, Sangyin Xan. No wonder you have such cultivation. It is an honor to meet you. Li Guang nodded and smiled. From this, it could be seen that he was rather well informed about the news in the immortal world. However, he was suddenly stunned, and his gaze swept back and forth between Sangyin Xan and Yu Qianzhou. He seemed to have thought of something, and he looked at Yu Qianzhou and asked doubtfully, could it be that you're the sect master of the immortal world chamber of commerce, Yu Qianzhou? Chapter 1002. When he said this, the most shocked person was Yu Qianzhou. His mouth was wide open. Oh my God! When did I have such a great reputation that even the water race hiding in the river Styx know my name? Grey Cloud Xian's face darkened on the spot. From the other party's reaction just now, it was very likely that the reason why the other party knew Yu Qianzhou's name was because he had heard of Grey Cloud Xian's name. This meant that the matter of him following the Celestial Emperor's decree to protect Yu Qianzhou had already spread throughout the netherworld. Father is wise, he is indeed Yu Qianzhou, big brother Yu as in, leaping over the dragon gate. Xiao Yuan didn't miss the opportunity to poke his head out from behind Yu Qianzhou and flatter him. Yu Qianzhou tilted his head and glanced at him, speechless. If I had known that you would have a father, I wouldn't have been your big brother Yu. But he still cupped his hands and smiled at Li Guang. Yu Qianzhou of the Immortal Realm's World Chamber of Commerce greets Your Majesty and Empress. Actually, after a moment of thought, he also realized that even if the Emperor had heard of him, it was impossible for him to recognize him. To be able to recognize him as Yu Qianzhou at a glance, it was most likely because of ashy cloud letters. The group of crown princes and princesses looked strangely at Yu Qianzhou, then at their father and mother. They had also heard of the World Chamber of Commerce's sect master Yu Qianzhou who had caused trouble in the immortal realm, but they didn't know how their father could recognize Yu Qianzhou at a glance. What they didn't know was that Li Guang and his wife had received the news about Yu Qianzhou and Ashen Yun Xan just before they set off. This news hadn't had time to spread in the Li Palace yet. Li Guang and his wife looked at each other, smiled faintly, then slowly sat back down. There had long been a rumor in the immortal world that Yu Qianzhou was able to conceal his cultivation level because he had mistakenly consumed some kind of immortal pill. In reality, his cultivation level was nothing special. In this way, the couple's suspicion that Yu Qianqiu was a late-stage immortal emperor expert was resolved. With Zhengyan Xian's mid-stage immortal emperor cultivation base, it was not worthy for the couple to stand and reply. In the distant sky, Ding Xiang and the others in the hidden dragon villa could only vaguely see the two parties interacting. As for what they were saying, they could not hear it clearly. At this moment, the fireflies in the empty belly of the mountain gate gradually scattered under the sound of the fish jumping in the water. The gazes of all the aquatic creatures turned in that direction, and the atmosphere instantly changed. Grey Cloud Xian's face tensed up as he looked over. Yu Qianqiu looked around in confusion, wondering what was going on. As the last nether river black carp leaped up, the last wandering firefly was devoured, and the last ray of light in the belly of the mountain was extinguished. In an instant, not a single ray of light could be seen on the surface of the river, and only the sound of the surging water could be heard. Rumble. There was a deafening rumble, and more than a dozen bolts of purple lightning flashed in the sky, illuminating the world with a purple haze. The strangest thing was that the bolts of purple lightning did not disappear after they appeared. Instead, they kept flashing and changing into arcs. The bolts of purple lightning formed a circle, spiraling continuously in the dark sky. Moreover, it spun faster and faster, until it was like a rotating purple light. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. He felt that this spiraling purple light was like a teleportation gate from the immortal world to the netherworld. Could it be that something was coming to the netherworld from another space, on the towering Minghuang mountain surrounded by the 5 peaks? Inside the simple yet magnificent, sacred yet mysterious Minghuang royal harem, a small building stood in the middle of a secluded forest. The attic on the second floor had an open window, and the only light inside came from the fireflies crawling on the roof. Looking out from the attic, one couldn't see the sun, moon, or stars, but there were many fireflies in the secluded forest, like stars in the night sky. Everything seemed so quiet and tranquil. The night wind blew, and the silver-armored 1,000 soldiers' long hair fluttered. He was wearing a silver armor, and his face was full of stubble. He was silently looking at the slowly crawling stars in the secluded forest, and no one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, the sound of a paper scroll being pulled came from the attic, and then a gentle voice sounded, "1,000 soldier, have you recovered from your injury?" The white-robed scholar didn't even raise his head. After pulling the paper scroll, he added ink to the brush in his hand. He gently put one hand behind his back, and the other hand held the brush and added ink to the paper scroll. The silver-armored 1,000 soldier slowly turned around and walked to the side of the scholar. Seeing that the ink on the inkstone was about to run out, he picked up the wooden spoon on the table, and gently scooped up a small spoonful of water and poured it on the inkstone. Then he put the wooden spoon back into the basin, and picked up the ink on the inkstone. With a slight rustling sound, he helped the scholar grind the ink on the inkstone. While grinding, he said, "My injury is healed, but the shock in my heart is still not gone. Yes. I am also very surprised. I didn't expect such an expert to appear in the human world. It is really unimaginable. This person is indeed not simple." As the scholar said this, the tip of the brush in his hand suddenly started to delicately sculpt. The thin face of an old man in a green robe appeared vividly under the tip of the brush, and the drawing was very realistic. It was by Changchun, whom Yu Qianqiu had been searching for so long without any news of him. The content of the painting was majestic, and the order of the content was by Changchun defeating the silver-armored 1,000 soldier. Then, it was the fierce battle with the 4 netherworld generals. The content of the painting was the scene of the scholar fighting with Bai Changchun. "I didn't expect him to be able to escape from your hands." The silver-armored 1,000 soldier paused and looked at the painting. He carefully ground the ink and said, "To be able to have you paint for him, he died with honor." Died? The brush in the scholar's hand stopped, and then he shook his head and continued to paint. "Perhaps. Do you suspect that he didn't die? Even if he didn't die at that time, can he still come out alive after escaping into that place? The silver-armored thousand soldier put down the ink in his hand and said with a frown, he wasn't a match for you at all. You chased him all the way and you still let him escape. What exactly happened? The scholar laughed softly and added ink to the brush in his hand. Perhaps he had thought of something, and the tip of the brush landed on the painting. Although Bai Changchun's green robe was already torn, his expression became more and more fierce. That impassioned aura of fighting against the heavens and earth leaped out, causing people's hearts to tremble. The silver-armored thousand soldier let out a sigh of relief. He couldn't help but think of the scene where he fought with this person. At that time, I hit him 1,300 times consecutively. Given his cultivation, it was already a miracle among miracles that he didn't die from such serious injuries. The scholar revealed a bitter smile that he hadn't shown for many years. He shook his head and said, this person's willpower is so strong that it's terrifying. As long as he's still breathing, he definitely won't admit defeat. When he realized that the difference in strength between us was too great, I also cherished his talent. I once told him that as long as he admitted defeat and submitted to me, I could spare his life and give him everything that I could. The silver-armored thousand soldier laughed and said, obviously, he rejected me. Otherwise, why would he be forced to escape into that place? The scholar suddenly straightened his back and looked at the distant night sky. He sighed and said, that's right, he rejected me. The words of rejection still resounded in my ears. He said, if you want me to submit to you, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall under your feet. If you want me to submit to you, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall under your feet. The silver-armored thousand soldier silently repeated a few times. His emotions were stirred up as he said, what a character. Right now, I really want to go to that world and see what's going on there. How could such a character appear in that world? The scholar waved his hand and said, don't even think about it. Jean Tai and I have a premonition that there's something waiting for us there. Once those people who provoked the heavens' punishment return there, they'll definitely suffer retribution. You're one of them. The silver-armored thousand soldier was silent for a while and said, with his cultivation and speed, there's no way he could escape from your pursuit. You should have had countless opportunities to kill him. Could it be because you cherished his talent and couldn't bear to kill him, so you forced him into that place and let him fend for himself? You've overestimated me and underestimated him. Since I can't subdue him, I won't let this scourge live. The scholar shook his head and dipped the brush in his hand in ink again. He began to paint the scene of him chasing after Bai Changchun. As he painted, he said, although this person's cultivation wasn't high, he did have some ability. I reckon that at that time, all the blood in his body had already flowed out, but he stubbornly held on and would rather die than surrender. He wouldn't give up until the end. While he was escaping, he released a portion of the celestial essence in his body. After the golden arcs formed by the celestial essence fused with the heaven and earth, a strong gale suddenly rose between heaven and earth. The gale was like a strong wind, pushing him to escape, but at the same time, it blocked my pursuit. In such a situation where he couldn't stop me, countless shocking thunderbolts appeared between heaven and earth. I chased him all the way, and the countless thunderbolts bombarded me all the way. That's not all. In the end, all kinds of extreme phenomena such as snow, rain, wind, frost, and thunderbolts appeared one after another to help him escape. I couldn't help but suspect that it was the heavens' punishment. Even thinking about it now makes my scalp tingle. How could this be? This was the first time the silver-armored thousand soldier had heard of such a strange thing. He was stunned and said, could it be that this person's cultivation method can borrow the power of heaven and earth? I'm afraid so. The scholar smiled bitterly and said, I can feel that the power of heaven and earth moved according to his stubborn will. It followed him all the way, but but it made things difficult for me. If not for this, how could he have escaped from me? However, the price he paid was also huge. The moment he barged into that place, I could feel that his cultivation was almost exhausted. His blood was drained, his cultivation was exhausted, and he was only left with one breath. After barging into that place, no matter how powerful he was, I'm afraid it would be difficult for him to survive. But when I said that he would die a glorious death, why did you say maybe? The silver-armored thousand soldier tilted his head and stared at him. Even though he was injured to this extent, you still don't dare to believe that he will die. Previously, I thought that he would definitely die, but later, after the Holy Maiden returned from the human world, I accidentally thought of asking the Holy Maiden to perform a divination for that person, to see if he was dead or alive. Chapter 1003. Saintess. Silver Armor Soldier was surprised. Could it be that the Saintess has deduced that the person is not dead? No. The scholar's expression showed a hint of helplessness as he focused on the tip of the brush. The Saintess refused to deduce this person, so I can't force her. Don't you think this is strange? If that person is dead, why would she refuse to deduce? The realm that the Saintess returned to is the realm where that person is. Maybe the Saintess already has an idea about that person. The pavilion fell into silence. Silver Armor Soldier couldn't say much about the Saintess, but his expression became serious as he felt that something was strange. The scholar seemed to have entered the state of painting. He lifted the brush and dipped it into the ink. His brush was like moving clouds and flowing water. The content of the painting was progressing more and more smoothly. However, just as the brush was about to move, the scholar suddenly froze. The tip of the brush stopped for a long time. The silver armor army of 1,000 soldiers had been staring at the tip of the brush, deep in thought. When the tip of the brush paused, he immediately came back to his senses. He looked at the scholar, only to see the scholar lifting the brush hesitantly. His brows were slightly furrowed, as though he had noticed something. Silver Armor Soldier couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" The brush was picked up by the slender and fair fingers and placed upside down on the brush rack. The elegant and noble scholar in white slowly raised his head. His deep eyes, which seemed to be able to see through everything, looked out of the window, through the forest, and into the distant night sky. His gaze looked gentle and had a cultured and refined aura. However, upon closer inspection, there was an unconcealable majesty and indifference. It was shocking. The scholar's slightly closed lips slowly opened and said indifferently, "It's the Dragon Transformation Sect." Dragon Transformation Sect. Silver Armor Soldier was startled. He didn't notice anything strange and looked out the window. Are we going to summon the Nether River Black Carps to leap through the Dragon Gate again? It should be. I haven't seen it for a long time. I wonder if any Nether River Black Carp will obtain the great opportunity to transform into a dragon. The scholar turned to Silver Armor Soldier and smiled. This is a rare opportunity. We can't miss it. Shall we go take a look? There was no need to say anything. The two of them had known each other for many years and could understand each other with just a look. The two of them turned into a streak of white light and silently passed through the window. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared into the endless night sky one after the other. Several fireflies that were climbing upside down on the roof of the attic to illuminate the place immediately fell down, flapped their wings, and flew out of the window. Through the window, the attic immediately became pitch black. In the sky above the Dragon Transformation Sect, the 10 over purple lightning were still spinning like a top, giving people a dazzling and blurry feeling. However, it caused the people below to willingly watch without blinking. Hiding behind Yu Qianqiu, little Yuan, who was grabbing his robe with his small hands, also stuck out his head and stared at the sky without blinking. However, Yu Qianqiu felt uncomfortable all over. The two little hands were tugging at his clothes from behind. It felt like there were two weights hanging on his clothes. The collar of his clothes was being strangled by the little fellow behind him. It was abnormally awkward. Damn it. Why are you so nervous? Yu Qianqiu could feel little Yuan's grip getting tighter and tighter. His neck was also getting tighter and tighter. He was speechless and wanted to pull the little fellow to the front. However, the others' awesome parents, brothers, and sisters were all present. He had no choice but to restrain himself. He twisted his strangely uncomfortable neck, and when he swept his gaze across his surroundings, he was suddenly stunned. In the distant water region with the dragon transformation sect as the center, a large group of messy people had silently appeared without a sound. The vision of the underworld was not very good. With his cultivation, if he did not pay attention, he would have missed them. Looking around, he could vaguely see that the people around him were all standing on the waves, and all of them were in an imposing manner. Some were standing with their arms crossed valiantly, while others had their hands behind their backs proudly. There was a distance between them, and very few of them were standing close to each other. It seemed like they were not the same group of people. From the different clothes they were wearing, it was clear that they were not people of the Li Palace. Old Song, don't just look up. Look at the people around you. Who are they? When Song Yunxin heard Yu Qianqiu's message, he subconsciously looked around. He would not have known if he did not look, but when he did, he was shocked. His eyes flickered for a long time before he replied, "Those that I can see clearly have a cultivation of at least the early stage of the Underworld Emperor. I can see those that are too far away, but I cannot see their cultivation. However, their cultivation should not be low. As for who they are, I have not seen any of them. They should all be experts of the underworld." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. Looking at the indistinct figures in the distance, there were at least 800 people. Could they all be experts of the Underworld Emperor level? He asked Xinyu in disbelief, "Xinyu, look around and see who those people are." Xinyu turned his head and glanced at him. When he saw the strange sight of the fourth prince of the Li Palace grabbing his clothes and strangling him, he couldn't help but find it funny. But when he looked around, his smile instantly vanished. His eyes scanned the area and he gasped in shock. They're all experts of the water tribe of the Underworld River. Their status in the water tribe is roughly the same as Li Guang's, but there are some who are even stronger. They should all be here to watch the Underworld River Black Carp race leap through the Dragon Gate. Yu Qianqiu immediately looked around again, wanting to memorize the appearances of the experts of the Underworld River's water tribe. Perhaps he would be able to use them when he had dealings with them in the future. But given his cultivation and the poor eyesight in the underworld, he could not see clearly even a little further. It was truly a pity. But what he did not know was that he and Tsangyin Xayan, two people of the immortal realm, had mingled with Li Guang's children in front of him, attracting the attention of many people. Especially Tsangyin Xayan's mid-stage immortal emperor cultivation and his own unfathomable cultivation. Quite a few experts of the Underworld River's water tribe secretly memorized their appearances. Most likely, even Tsangyin Xayan himself hadn't expected this. He had come to the netherworld with Yu Qianqiu while suppressing his resentment. However, he had made the mysterious experts of the netherworld river's water race remember him. With a loud rumble, a purple thunderbolt suddenly burst out from the purple halo and once again struck the dragon transformation gate. The violet lightning swam through the dragon transformation gate, and an ancient and majestic chi once more rippled through the surroundings. The violet halo in the sky suddenly expanded, its radiance growing even more dazzling. "It's here." No one knew who suddenly let out a cry of surprise, but everyone's gazes immediately focused on the sky. Amidst the purple halo, a dazzling starlight shone and drilled out. The dazzling dot of starlight grew larger and larger as it leisurely rushed over from the sky. "What is this thing?" Yu Qianqiu's voice suddenly appeared in the quiet surroundings. Yu Qianqiu looked at the sky in shock and pulled on Sangyin Xayan's sleeve, completely unaware of how much of a wet blanket he was. How would I know? Sangyin Xayan looked at him like he was looking at an idiot, and flicked his sleeve, telling him not to disturb him. In reality, Yu Qianqiu had only subconsciously asked, and his attention had already been attracted by the dot of starlight. Even though he had asked Sangyin Xayan, he did not listen to Sangyin Xayan's reply, as if he had no intention of disturbing Sangyin Xayan. Sangyin Xayan resentfully turned his head to look at the sky. Fortunately, everyone's attention was on the sky, and no one was willing to pay attention to these two fellas. The dazzling dot of starlight got closer and closer, and everyone could already see the outline of the dot of starlight. Within the glass-like glow, there was a carriage that flew over. There was nothing special about the carriage. It was an open carriage that looked like bronze, and there was a bent umbrella handle at the back. The roof of the carriage was supported by a canopy, and together with the wheels of the carriage, the entire carriage seemed to be made of bronze. What surprised everyone was that the two steeds that were pulling the carriage looked sturdy, but their bodies were as transparent as crystal. There was no flesh or blood in their bodies, and they were crystal clear, as if they were made of glass. The two transparent steeds galloped in the air, and the crystal silk-like mane on their necks and backs fluttered in the wind. They could be said to be divine and extraordinary. As the carriage got closer, they could see the ancient cloud patterns on the carriage, but the carriage was empty. The two transparent steeds pulled the empty carriage, and after descending above the dragon transformation gate, they spread out their hooves, and with the dragon transformation gate as the center, they galloped in a circle. Under the envelopment of the glass-like glow, the entire carriage was so mysterious, and it made people feel that it was so magical, so unbelievable. Oh my! What is the meaning of this? Yu Qianqiu's eyeballs followed the carriage in a circle, and he muttered in a silly manner. Sangyin Xayan also sighed with emotion. If it was said that he was stifled before, now he felt that this trip was worth it, and he had broadened his horizons. Neigh, neigh. The two steeds suddenly let out a long neigh that pierced through the night sky, and under everyone's gaze, their beautiful manes fluttered in the wind as they turned around and slowly descended on the dragon transformation gate. After taking a few steps on the mountain peak, the clear sound of horse hooves could be heard, and the two transparent steeds sneezed a few times before stopping. Just at this moment, the glass-like glow that enveloped the carriage suddenly exploded with light, and illuminated the entire night sky, causing everyone to not dare to open their eyes. When the light weakened and everyone opened their eyes, they saw that the glass-like glow on the carriage had already enveloped the entire dragon transformation gate. The 100-meter-tall mountain that towered over the underworld river emitted a glass-like glow, and everyone could clearly see every corner of the mountain. It was abnormally dazzling, and people could not help but sigh in admiration. This was truly worthy of being the legendary dragon transformation gate. Paw paw. Two whips sounded out, and after the two vanguards of the Li Palace waved their braids, the Li Guang couple had already flashed to the surface of the water, and the couple unhesitatingly knelt on the surface of the water. As the couple knelt, all the members of the Li Palace, from top to bottom, knelt towards the dragon transformation gate. Even Xiao Yuan, who was behind Yu Qianqiu, sensibly flashed out, and joined his brothers and sisters in kneeling down. Under the lead of the couple, all the members of the Li Palace respectfully and devoutly began to kowtow 3 times and kowtow 9 times on the surface of the underworld river. Chapter 1004. At this moment, all eyes were focused on this sacred and solemn scene. Other than the members of the Underworld River's water tribe standing on the surface of the Underworld River, there were also quite a few experts hidden in the darkness watching this scene from the dark night sky. Everyone might argue or fight over other matters, but today, the main character of this scene belonged to the Li Palace Black Carp clan of the water tribe of the Underworld River. No one dared to raise their glory. Because this was the glory that the ancestors of the underworld river Black Carp clan had exchanged for with endless blood, tears, and suffering. It was a glory that would benefit their descendants for generations to come. The ancient dragon gate that stood in the middle of the underworld river, the Pegasus that pierced through the sky, all of them spoke of the vicissitudes of history that had passed countless years ago. As the descendants of the later generations, they had no way to repay the kindness that their ancestors had accumulated through blood and tears. They could only worship with excitement and piety. As someone who did not know of this past event, Yu Qianqiu only felt that this group of people were really boring. Wasn't it just a carriage that pierced through the sky? Was there a need to pay such great respects? While he was disdainful, he was also somewhat glad that he had finally gotten rid of that unlucky child. He loosened the lapels of his clothes and pulled them up, feeling much more comfortable. But what made him not know whether to laugh or cry was that after this group of water tribe members paid their respects and stood up, little Yuan once again rushed over, his small face flushed with excitement. He once again tightly grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's robes, as if he was afraid that he would run away. His robes had been pulled askew again. This was really damaging to his image. There were also beauties present. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He secretly tried to pull back, but little Yuan refused to let go, as if he had his eyes set on him. Helpless, Yu Qianqiu could only let him do as he pleased. Because at this moment, Li Guang's tiger eyes were wide open and he was excitedly sweeping his gaze over his subjects. It was not convenient for Yu Qianqiu to let him see that he was bullying his son. His hand that was secretly trying to snatch little Yuan's robes loosened, and the collar of his robes tightened around his neck again. Other than fuck, Yu Qianqiu had no words to describe his current mood. The grace of our ancestors extends to our descendants for generations to come. Since ancient times, we must not neglect the kindness of our ancestors. We must follow it from generation to generation. Li Guang's agitated voice rang out, his tiger-like eyes glowing red from excitement. He looked around at the members of the Li Palace and said, "I, the Black Carp race of the Nether River, await your instruction." As long as they had tried it the last time, they would avoid it. Those who hadn't tried it before, but felt that they had the strength to do so, could give it a try. However, the ancient teachings must be kept in mind. After this attempt, if you fail, you will lose the chance to try again. Please consider for yourself whether or not you should wait for the next time to try again. With that said, he waved his hand. Paw paw. Two whipping sounds immediately rang out, and a large area of water around the dragon transformation sect immediately became strange. The water waves stirred, and countless nether river black carp swam from the bottom of the water to the surface. Their dorsal fins and tails were everywhere moving on the water surface. All eyes were focused on this area of water. Many of the nether river black carps hesitated for a while. Many of the smaller ones, perhaps feeling that they did not have the confidence to leap over the dragon gate, calmly sank back into the water after their excitement. These were the majority. There were still several hundred left, but all of them were at least 5 or 6 meters long. Just their backs that stuck out of the water was a long line. At this moment, the side of the dragon transformation sect facing Li Guang and his wife was also the side Yu Qianqiu and the others were standing on. The several hundred massive nether river black carps suddenly parted, their enormous backs sticking out of the water forming 2 long lines, leaving a 10-some meter wide channel in the middle. The black carp at the very end swam out of the formation, and quickly swam to the front of the channel. It turned around, paused in the water, and suddenly broke through the waves like a shuttle. In an instant, it was dozens of meters away from the dragon transformation sect. With a kishwa sound, its 5-meter-long body fiercely shot out of the water, and with a slight angle, it directly shot towards the dragon gate. This action, not only Li Guang and the other water races, even the usually indifferent Yu Qianqiu became worried. He hoped that this black carp would leap over the dragon transformation sect, and then witness the legendary scene of transforming into a dragon. Even Xiao Yuan, who was behind him, excitedly grabbed onto Yu Qianzhou's robe. Yu Qianzhou immediately cursed his ancestors in his heart. His neck being strangled was a small matter, but having his clothes torn in front of everyone was too unsightly. However, it was not good to scold him, much less use his hands or feet to kick him. His sullen waist slowly bent as his clothes were pulled. That black carp that was swimming towards the glazed light that enveloped the entire dragon transformation sect seemed to be swimming against the current of a waterfall, its body agilely swaying in the light as it swam upwards. Yet, when it was not even halfway up the river, its speed of ascension became slower and slower. Its body began to move more and more rapidly, as if it wanted to swim upwards with all its might. However, after advancing 2 or 3 meters, it was unable to advance any further. After a stalemate in the light for a while, it finally regretfully fell down. Amidst the sounds of regret, its enormous body smashed into the surface of the nether river with a dong sound, and disappeared into the water, never to come out again. At this time, anyone could see that the biggest reason why the dragon gate was difficult to leap over was probably because of the glazed light coming from the carriage standing on the mountain top. Thinking about how the carriage was able to break through the air, the glazed light on its body was definitely not ordinary. It was natural that it was difficult to break through. Among the 2 groups of nether river black carps on the surface of the water, several dozen suddenly quietly disappeared into the water, no longer appearing. Presumably, these several dozen were estimating that their strength was about the same as the one that had just taken the lead. After weighing their strength, they felt that there was no need to make a pointless attempt. It was better to wait until their strength increased, and then calmly wait for the next dragon gate call to try their skills. This empty Pegasus carriage, I wonder who will be lucky enough to sit on it, and who will be able to transform into a dragon and soar through the air. The one speaking was a woman. It was the second princess of the Li Palace, standing in front of Yu Qianzhou. When these words were spoken, the gazes of the brothers and sisters all fell on the quiet, empty carriage at the top of the mountain, each of them revealing an expression of envy. Only the third princess, who had appeared first, still had a calm and indifferent expression, as if she was not too interested in the matter of leaping over the dragon gate. On the other hand, Yu Qianzhou and Grey Cloud Exayan glanced at each other, both revealing an expression of sudden understanding. They had previously been wondering why the Pegasus carriage had made such a big scene, pulling an empty carriage through the air. It turned out that only after leaping over the dragon gate and transforming into a dragon would a black carp have the right to ride the Pegasus carriage through the air. Grey Cloud Exayan's gaze then froze. Only now did he realize that Yu Qianzhou was standing there with his shoulders crooked like a loafer. When he saw little Yuan, who was tugging at his clothes, he immediately gave Yu Qianzhou an expression of schadenfreude, "You deserve it." At this time, the people of the hidden Dragon Mountain villa in the distance, after witnessing the miraculous scene of the Pegasus carriage descending, were truly shocked. Unfortunately, because they were afraid of causing trouble, they had stayed a little too far away. They could not see the scene clearly, let alone hear what the people there were saying. From time to time, the gazes of the group would turn towards Grey Cloud Exayan and Yu Qianzhou, who were still standing among the people of the river Styx's water race. They could not help but admire the extraordinary courage of these two. It was truly a great pity that they could not stand close enough to clearly see such a spectacle. But now, they did not have the courage to approach again. Not to mention the numerous experts of the river Styx's water race on the surface of the water. Even in the sky, they could vaguely see experts hiding. Occasionally, they would even glance at them with unfriendly gazes. It's a pity that before father left, he said that as the royalty of the river Styx's black carp, we have to give way to our clansmen when it comes to matters of right and wrong. We can only be ranked last. The first princess sighed slightly, her expression somewhat unwilling. That's right. The second princess also sighed slightly. It's a pity that every time the Pegasus carriage descends, it will only take away one of our clansmen who has leaped into the dragon gate. We don't know when the next time will be. I heard that there was once a clansman who succeeded in leaping into the dragon gate before our royal family. In the end, we, the members of the royal family, did not even have the chance to try. Yu Qianqiu and Song Yun, whose shoulders were tilted and whose movements were strange, looked at each other with confidence. The two of them exchanged glances, thinking that they had learned another secret. It turned out that the Pegasus carriage would only take away one person who succeeded in leaping into the dragon gate each time. The great crown prince of Li Palace, who stood at the head of the group, slowly turned his head and glanced at his two younger sisters. He coldly snorted and said, "It seems that my two younger sisters are certain of victory in this dragon gate leap. Since you're confident, you can charge out and try. Once you leap into the dragon gate, not even father can stop you. I'm afraid that you're still worried that you won't succeed and will be severely punished by father afterwards." His tone was somewhat unkind. The first princess immediately retorted, "From what eldest brother says, you seem to be more confident than we are. Then why don't you do as you say and charge out and set an example for us?" She then changed the topic and said, "Second brother, third brother, don't you think what I said makes sense?" Yu Qianqiu instantly tilted his shoulders in amusement. He didn't think that the royal family of the water tribe was not inferior to the royal family of the human realm. Even siblings were scheming against each other. Just as he was wondering if these unfilial children of his would do something out of line, he suddenly realized that his siblings were all as quiet as cicadas in winter. He instinctively turned his head to look, and sure enough, Li Guang was already glaring at them angrily. At this moment, one of the two rows of black carps on the surface of the river Styx had already come out to make its preparations. After a moment of preparation, it broke through the waves with a whoosh, its speed far faster than the previous one. Before it even reached the foot of the mountain, there was a splash as a giant black carp, 7 to 8 meters in size, shot out. Piercing through the glazed light, it instantly covered half of the distance to the 100-meter mountain. Once it slowed down, its body quickly twisted like a migrating fish swimming against the current of a waterfall. Very quickly, it rose another 20 meters, and was only 20 meters away from its destination. What was most worrying was that its momentum was still not exhausted. Its enormous body was rapidly moving, and it continued to advance meter by meter. Beautiful. Yu Qianqiu's mouth was agape, and he was just short of applauding and cheering. In any case, to him, it didn't matter who transformed into the dragon gate. It had nothing to do with him. However, its shoulders tilted even more, and its clothes were stretched taut. The little fellow behind it was indeed a little too excited. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.